In any organization, we would want to protect our sensitive data from disclosure, alteration, or destruction. Remember, these are the opposites of the CIA triad. We need to look at how we can protect the data in each of its three states. Data at rest is stored data. It's sitting on a storage media somewhere and not currently being used or moved. This could be disks, tapes, CDs, DVDs, USB drives, whatever we use to store our data on. And for data at rest, we'd want to use disk encryption or media encryption. This can either be full or partial. Which solution we choose is depending on how we're protecting things and what we want to protect. If, for instance, we have both our operating system that we're actively using and data stored on the same disk, we would be forced to use the partial disk encryption. This is in no way ideal, but it's better than not having it at all. A better solution, however, would be to have the sensitive data on a separate disk that's full disk encrypted. We would then decrypt it when we need to access the data. And for the OS drive, we could still use full disk encryption for when it's locked or shut off. When we're talking about backup tapes, it should always be full encryption. And we can choose either hardware or software encryption. The hardware encryption would be the drive that's actually writing to the tape doing the encryption. The software encryption would be the program we use for our backups. It is normally faster using hardware encryption, but it's not always the best solution. It really depends on the requirements you have for your backup. For USB drives or other removable media drives, it is a good idea to use full disk encryption as well. And while CDs and DVDs can be encrypted, they are easier to break and not really advised. Data in motion is data being transferred over a network. This can both be internally or over the internet. And regardless of which network it's being transferred over, it's always a good idea to use end-to-end encryption. Many companies don't do it internally, but if an attacker has gained access to our network or it's an internal employee, they can now sniff the sensitive data. So using end-to-end encryption, even for our internal networks, actually makes sense. Encrypting and decrypting our data only takes a couple of milliseconds if the system doing it has enough resources. But understand it does add a little delay. An end user would obviously not notice that there's a 10, 20 or 30 millisecond delay on their data. When we look at data in use, we can't really encrypt it because someone is actively using it. They need to be able to see the data unobscured. That doesn't mean we can't have good security practices in place though. We would use a clean desk policy, which basically means if you have data printed out, you're okay to have it at your desk as long as you're there and you're actively using it. If you no longer need it, it needs to be shredded. If you need to use it later, it needs to be locked away in a safe. Your desk is clean. We would also have a print policy. I've worked and consulted in many places where people would do prints and then just leave them on the printer, some of them being highly sensitive information. The best solution for that is to have people send prints to a printer queue, but them actually having to be at the printer with their access badge in order to start the print. They send it to the print queue, they walk over to the printer, they tap their badge on the printer, and their print prints. This obviously has some cost associated to it, and if that's not possible, then we need to enforce that people need to go to the printer as soon as they hit print. I've multiple times heard people say, "Oh, I printed that out, but when I got to the printer it wasn't there." When I asked them, "How long ago did you print it out?" "Oh, that was a couple of hours ago." That means that someone else has probably taken your sensitive data. We should also never allow shoulder surfing. Basically someone standing behind you while you're working on your workstation, which could allow them to see sensitive information on your monitor. We could also install view angle privacy screens on the monitors. What they do is anyone sitting right in front of the computer, the screen will be a little bit darker, but anyone standing at 20 degrees or more off center from the monitor wouldn't be able to see anything on the screen. And then we should also have a policy in place where people need to lock their PCs when they leave it, and it'll be done automatically after a couple of minutes of inactivity. This is a feature that's rarely enforced and there's very little focus on. And even if you are in a locked off area, you leaving your computer unlocked when you go to the bathroom or you get something to drink is a security concern. It should never be allowed. And while the data in rest and the data in motion are technical controls to a large extent, this is administrative. We need to train our users and raise their awareness so they can do the right thing. They can protect our data. How we handle and store our data is also very important. We only want trusted individuals to have access to our sensitive data, and they should have clear policies and guidelines on how they should access it, when they can access it, and why they can access it. This feeds back to the need to know. And we should have logs and we should have auditing in place to make sure that this happens. In the case of Natalie Sulman or Octomom, I'm pretty sure that Kaiser went in after the fact and looked at the logs, see who had accessed the data. But in a perfect world scenario, which is what you need to assume for the exam, we would have a back-end auditing system that would look at who logs in and accesses which data, and if it's likely they have a good reason to do so. Always assume perfect world. We have top-down IT security governance. People are always more important than stuff, and you have the time and the money to do your due care and your due diligence. We also need to be very aware of how we store our data. If we use backup tapes, they should be kept in a secure, climate-controlled, and preferably geographically distant location. While most of the restores we perform are non-critical and just users who might have deleted a file or forgot where they placed it, the truly important ones, the one where we have a disaster, what if there's an earthquake and our tape storage facility is just around the corner? Or a backup data center? With tape backups, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to have it 20 or 30 hours away, but when you pick a storage facility, keep in mind where it's located so it's not just down the street and it's still close enough to get the backup tapes to your facility in a reasonable time and manner. A lot of older breaches on tapes don't even sound real. As an IT security professional, when I hear about them, I think, how can they think that's possibly a good idea? Some of them were people having backup tapes at their house, unencrypted, in a backup tape container. When their house was broken into, the thieves stole the backup tapes. Or there were cases when they were just kept in a public access area in a storage closet. Anyone could walk in, open the closet, take the tapes, and walk off. And even if they went a little further than that and put them in a storage room, it could probably be a place where there would be no access log. Hundreds of employees could access it and the tapes were just sitting there. So as an IT security manager or a risk advisor, we need to understand how we keep our data secure at all stages and all media. For attackers, it's always easier to steal the key than it is to break the lock. Assume the attackers are very good at what they do and that they'll do a lot of research before actually attacking. They learn that we have a great layered defense. It would be a waste of their time and money to try to get to our data on our actual servers, but we keep our backup tapes upstairs next to a public restroom. They don't need to access our systems. They just need to walk up there and steal the tapes. In many large organizations, we keep petabytes and petabytes of data, and it's just not feasible to have it on spinning disk. In those cases, we would most likely transfer the data to tape backups. There are many industries where, by law, they're required to keep data for a certain amount of time. But data should also be disposed of when the data is no longer useful or it's beyond the legal requirements, whichever is greater. If the data to us is useful for a week, but the requirements ask us to keep it for a year, after a year we can dispose of the data. In the US, the HIPAA rules and the PCI DSS have very clear requirements of which type of data should be kept and how long it should be kept for. That could be a year, 3 years, 7 years, or forever. This is part of your responsibility to know, so know the requirements for your organization's line of business, as well as the internal policies. Also understand that there are rules that might require you not to keep the data. This could be if you're accepting credit card payments and you're not the credit card processor. In many states and countries, you obviously need to keep a log of what was done, the actual transaction, but in many places you're not allowed to keep the actual data from the credit card on file. That's the responsibility of a credit card processor. Many of the large attacks that have happened in the US where credit cards were compromised, they either kept data they weren't supposed to, or they were the credit card processor. So very clearly understand the rules and regulations in your field, your state and your country.